What's going on, guys? I'm Brandon from Walker's Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. You know how some people have clamp racks? Well, I made a clamp wall. Stick around and I'll show you how I did it. So I was just hanging out in the shop and all these clamps appeared. As most of you know, I partnered with Poding Jorgensen this year and they were nice enough to fill my whole shop with clamps. The only problem is I didn't have enough space to store all these things. So I needed not just a clamp rack, but a clamp wall. I sketched up my idea and went to work. What I'm marking out here will be the main hangers for the parallel clamps. They're basically just 12-inch by 10-inch squares cut out of 3/4 inch plywood. Sometimes miter saws just don't have the capacity that you need, so what you can do is make one cut, flip it over, and finish the cut on the other side. I had to do this with several of the pieces for this project. These strips I'm cutting to length will be for hand clamps, squeeze clamps, ratchet clamps, and the smaller F-style clamps as well. After I had them all cut to length, I took them over to the table saw to trim off what I didn't need. I should mention that most of the pieces that I used for this project were just scraps that I had laying around from other things I had built. As always, I will link everything I use in this video in the description below for you guys, as well as all the clamps so you guys can check those all out because they're pretty awesome. Once everything was cut, I marked out the squares where I wanted to cut them to make a sort of triangle pattern. I measured in 3 inches on the larger ones and 2 inches on the smaller ones, and then drew a line to connect the marks. To cut the larger ones, I set up my miter gauge with a sacrificial fence, a stop block, and a clamp to ensure that I got the same cut every time. The smaller hangers were a little bit more tricky because my miter gauge wouldn't adjust to a steep enough angle, so I had to use my tapering jig. I do have a video on how to make this jig if you guys are interested. I'll link it in the video description. Basically how it works is I line up my cut with the edge of the jig, clamp the piece down, and then I can cut steep angles or tapers. It's a really useful tool to have around. After those were all cut, I turned my attention to the pieces that will hold the hand clamps. I formed sort of a T shape with 2 pieces of plywood and then glued and clamped them. I did the same on a larger scale for the ones that will hold the squeeze clamps and ratchet clamps. Once the glue was cured enough to handle, I pre-drilled and drove in screws for extra support. For the backboard of this whole system, I used a full sheet of 3/4 inch birch plywood. Here I am marking and laying out where each one will go. I just measured the clamp so I knew exactly how much room I had between each hanger, then I could trace around them, and that way I knew exactly where to drill the holes for the screws that would be driven in from the backside. To attach them at first, I used a combination of wood glue and CA glue with the accelerator to get a quick hold so I could drive in the screws from the back. Once I did a few, I realized I didn't really need the CA glue because it was going to move around anyway. I just pre-drilled again from the backside into the hangers that acted like a guide for the screws to keep the hangers aligned. And this worked pretty well. After everything was attached, I did a quick once-over with a sanding block just to knock down any of the sharp corners and edges. I decided on some oil-based polyurethane spray to bring out a little bit of the warm color in the birch plywood. I thought about brushing it on, but rattle can just seemed a lot easier. I guess I could have broke out my spray gun for this, but I really don't like to clean it, so I usually just go this route for shop furniture. So, there's some times in the shop when I do some questionable things, and this is probably one of those times. You know, working alone, sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. The camera just happened to be rolling on this one. I know some of you guys know how this is. I guess I probably could have called a friend to help me out, but you know, what fun is that? After some close calls and some sketchy balancing, I finally got it up on my assembly table safely-ish, and myself out from underneath of it. Just so you guys know, none of this was easy by myself. After sliding it to where I could maneuver it up onto the wall, I realized that my original mark was clearly too high, so I had to remeasure and then mark a new one. Once I finally kind of got it slid into place, I could figure out how I was going to get it up onto the wall. I started on one corner, drove in a screw, and then moved to the other side. After I got it on my marks and screwed in, I realized that it was still too high, so I slapped a level on it, dropped it down a little bit, and then secured it in place with about 208 screws. And then came the fun part, loading it with clamps and hoping it didn't fall off the wall. Just to be clear, I did make sure to screw all those screws into studs. This process actually went very well and was satisfying for my slight OCD. I want to take this time to tell you guys how much I appreciate your support. Without you, I would definitely not be doing this. I enjoy sharing my woodworking journey with you guys and also sharing what I've learned along the way. I hope all my videos bring you some value and you stick around to see what the future holds because I have some pretty awesome plans this year. Some of those being actual plans. So you guys know I do offer some plans. This particular project does not have plans, but I will offer the SketchUp file in the description below. But as far as future stuff, I do want to make more plans and make those available to you guys. So stay tuned to see what the future holds. That does it for this. I hope you enjoyed. While you're here, check out the video in the top corner and let me know how you like it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.